Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel Stuck in the Mud. I'm Kirsty and today I want to talk to you a bit about my experiences with postnatal anxiety and it was really a difficult time in my life, so hard and quite traumatizing because I really didn't know what was wrong with me after I had my last daughter. So I have actually got 5 children. But after my last child, my daughter, who was born 2.5 years ago, I experienced, I would say, extreme symptoms after I had physical symptoms, which I couldn't really explain. And it was a really frightening time for me. It was so scary because there was so much going on that I just couldn't explain. And I would try to explain to doctors how I was feeling, and it was difficult for them to kind of pinpoint what was the matter. So let me give a bit of a backstory to this. So during my pregnancy, following a previous miscarriage, I got pregnant really quickly with my daughter after the miscarriage, and I was quite anxious, I'd say, for the most part during the pregnancy because of what happened previously. It was my one and only miscarriage, so it was quite a traumatic time. And I did find the pregnancy quite anxiety producing because I was very conscious of movements and if the baby was okay, if I was going to be okay. And then, but it was quite straightforward, the pregnancy, everything kind of went to plan. But it was also during the pandemic, so it was a really surreal time for everyone. We all felt it was an extremely stressful time. It was just really the unknown. We didn't know what was happening. It was all very strange. Can't think of a better word for it. It was very, very weird. It was weird times. So obviously we had all that going on, and I've got a pregnancy during the pandemic, which was extremely unnerving because I was pregnant. I didn't know if I caught COVID, what would happen, to me or the baby. And obviously just coming off the back of a miscarriage, it was really frightening to think I was going to have a baby during the pandemic. But when I got pregnant, I honestly thought that this would be over and done with by the time I had her. I didn't see going into hospital would be a problem because, it'll be over and done with by then. But unbeknownst to us at the time, it did go on for quite a lot longer than I think we all thought originally. We all thought it wouldn't be going on for like as long as it did. So it was a surreal pregnancy because I couldn't have my husband come to the appointments, and there was a lot of other stuff going on. My mum was really sick as well, and there was a lot going on at the time. The pandemic, it's a lot to process. So I did have quite an anxious pregnancy, and I was under the mental health team. So they were there to guide me. They are people that I'd been involved with in previous pregnancies because I'd had some trouble in the perinatal period before I had the baby and afterwards, but mostly beforehand, until I had my 3rd daughter, where I did have some problems afterwards with anxiety and OCD. It kind of decided to rear its ugly head again, and I was having a real hard time after my 3rd daughter. But fast forward into my daughter now, my last daughter, my 5th child, it was after I had her that things really did come to a head. It was just a real traumatic period of my life. I look back on it now and, I really don't know how I survived some of those times because it really did take me to some of the darkest places I've ever been. So after going into hospital for a start was really scary. I was having really bad panic attacks at the time. I was very nervous about going in for my planned C-section. So it was hard, you know, going in. I was very scared that something would happen to me or the baby and I wouldn't get to see the baby grow up, or, you know, something could go wrong. And I was on the run up to this birth, I was praying a lot. I was indulging in compulsive behavior. Like mentally, I would have little rituals. I'd have to do things I'd have to think about in a certain order to hopefully make sure the baby and I were safe during the birth. And so that was really scary. And also going in to have a baby in the hospital when there's a whole pandemic going on, that was really difficult, because, you know, who wants to go into hospital when there's a pandemic going on? You know, we know the virus was about, and we know it was killing a lot of people, and there was a lot of unknowns about it. So anyway, it was a stressful time going in, and I did go in. I did eventually have the C-section, and I had the support of the mental health people there in hospital. Then afterwards, you know, I had the baby, everything went fine, and I did feel a lot better. That relief of having the baby and the support of the staff and the support of my husband, who was allowed to stay in hospital with me, that was just amazing to have his support there with me. And he didn't leave me there. I was in the hospital for, I think, about 3 days before I came home, and everything seemed a lot more relaxed. I felt like, you know, I did it, we've got the baby, and everything's okay. But then very shortly after I had her and I got home, I started to feel very uneasy. So the way I can describe it, I just felt something wasn't quite right. I didn't feel quite right. It was difficult, because as soon as we came out of hospital, we went back into a lockdown, second lockdown in the UK, and that, not having people come by and visit the baby, you know, I wasn't allowed to have people come by. My parents were older, and obviously my mum was quite sick, and I didn't want them to obviously catch COVID with me just coming fresh out of hospital. So it was a difficult time. It was really hard not to have like friends and family come and visit her, because I think it's just, as a new parent, I mean, I've got 5 children now, but, you know, as a parent to a new baby, you want to share that baby with everyone, and you want to, you know, just everyone to be involved and just be a happy time. And it really wasn't as such, because although we were happy and, you know, it was lovely bringing her home to see her brother and her sisters, it should have been a celebration, you know, with all our friends and family, and it just couldn't happen. So I felt really low about that, and I felt quite depressed about it. But then we just had to get on with it, because that was the rules. You know, we were in a lockdown, and we had the help of my husband's parents, which was great, because they were in our kind of designated bubble. But to not have my parents come, you know, and just do the normal things we would do was extremely difficult. But then I started to get some strange symptoms, like physical symptoms of, you know, pains in my neck. It almost felt like tension, pains up the back of my neck. And I was very overly concerned about this, like, what's wrong with me? Like, I felt like, you know, is something really wrong after I've had the baby? You know, I was very conscious about the fact I was on blood thinners because of my age, because I was just 41 when I had her, but almost 42 at the end of that month. So they, you know, I had blood thinners. After I had her, I had to take them every day, an injection that my husband gave me. And, you know, I was very concerned about the fact that I might get blood clot. It was just on my mind all the time, like what could go wrong. And I became more overly concerned about myself at that point than the baby, funnily enough. It was more about myself. And, you know, I think that health anxiety kicked in pretty bad, like extremely bad. Concerned that I'd leave the baby, my family, and and it terrified me. It was a really terrifying time. And then I think, I wasn't on medication at that point, but I did discuss with my doctor about going back on my old medication, which I did at a very low dose, but I had a weird reaction to it. I ended up having a massive panic attack and taking myself to hospital to find out what was wrong. I had a high blood pressure, but I think it was from the result of the massive panic attack, and just something didn't feel right. I didn't feel good. They thought that it might be the combination of, you've just had a baby. I'd gone back on my old medication, which was always good for me, and then, there's a lot of stuff going on at the time, and that I was on blood thinners, so maybe the medicine went, the medication went into my system really quickly, and I'd not been on it for a long time, so it was scary, really, really, really frightening, because I didn't know what was going on with me. I thought something's wrong, something's not right, and I think with that over kind of stress time and the fact that the situation we were all in, I probably wasn't looking after myself well enough, and by the time she was 6 weeks old, I was in hospital with the onset of sepsis, really. I had a kidney infection which had spread through to my bloodstream, and I was on, it was a really bad infection. I was in there for a while, and that was scary in itself because everyone was wearing masks, and it was COVID, and COVID was in the hospital, and I remember being on this ward being terrified because I was on IV antibiotics and I was away from my baby, and it was really scary, and I had weird reactions to some of the meds they gave me in hospital, and that in itself was frightening. And so yeah, it was a lot. But afterwards, when I came out of hospital, eventually I had to have some IV antibiotics at home as well administered, and I felt like it's almost like a disassociation. I know I've really read about this a lot more since I had my daughter, and I did feel like very floaty. I was like almost separated from my body almost. I was just very like aware of not being like just feeling very strange, like I was separate from myself. It was a weird feeling, and it was scary because when I came out of hospital, I started to feel like I had blocked ears. That was one of the first symptoms I noticed, very blocked ears, and my vision was weird. Everything felt like it was off balance, so I felt like everything was just at an angle, and it just felt so scary because I thought, what is going on with me? Like, what is wrong with me? And the more I thought about that, the thing, it just seemed to get worse and worse, like different symptoms. Like I felt, like I say, I was floating, and it was, my vision went funny, really, really strange. And I'd have floaters. I'd be very sensitive to the light outside. I would have to wear sunglasses everywhere. And I was having a lot of panic attacks. I ended up having like fast heart rate. My heart rate was just through the roof. So it was a real scary time, and these symptoms just seemed to just take over. Like I say, they were just, I was sensitive to the light. I remember just walking around everywhere with sunglasses on because it just felt like the only way I could get some relief. But when I walked anyway, it just felt like I say, everything was just weird, like off to the side, and my vision was weird. And I thought, what on earth is going on with me? I ended up having the ambulances called out because I thought I was, I don't know, having a heart attack or something was wrong. I ended up having scans. They were scanning my head because they thought maybe I had a blood clot because I'd had a C-section. So that was to rule out any other problems. And what a difficult time. I know the medical professionals have to rule everything out, and but it was so scary to kind of not know what was wrong. But everything came back okay. Everything, they said, looked fine. Obviously I'd been through quite a serious infection, so maybe my body was just kind of getting used to that, and then I'd had this reaction in hospital to some of the antibiotics. I was thinking, has that left me with some kind of permanent damage? You know, you kind of question everything. I know labyrinthitis was another suggestion from the doctors, and yeah, so many tests just to kind of rule out anything out, which I guess they have to do. They have to do it. They have to rule it out. But when I actually did my own research, I came across someone that had had very similar symptoms to me, and they were after having a baby. So I started to research a bit more, and then I read, I think it was on some kind of chat room somewhere, you know, these websites like Mumsnet, NetMums, that kind of thing. And, you know, someone was discussing their symptoms after having a baby, and they were virtually identical. The blocked ears was kind of one thing that a lot of people mentioned, and they're being off balance, like they were on a boat. So I thought, this can't be a coincidence. Like the vision problems, everything like that, this can't be a coincidence that we're all experiencing this. What is it? And they all came back to anxiety, extreme physical symptoms of anxiety. And not many people talk about this after pregnancy. We hear a lot about postnatal depression, which is very, very serious, and postnatal psychosis. And you don't hear a lot about postnatal anxiety and OCD. It's not talked about a lot. But I was very obsessed about my health, which I know can go hand in hand with health anxiety. And it's very common to have these after having a baby, because it's, you know, such a change. It's a big change to your family. You know, maybe it's your first baby, or maybe it's subsequent babies like myself, but it's still a big change to everything. And bearing in mind we were in a pandemic as well, you know, and I was having some personal issues with family members being ill and stuff like that. You know, there was a lot going on, and I'd had an infection. But, you know, to have so many other people experiencing similar physical kind of sensations and physical strange things happening to them, I thought there's got to be a correlation here between the two. And when I read into postnatal anxiety, there was a lot of people saying they had the extreme kind of obsession about their health, about their child's health, the baby's health, and just being having those extremes of anxiety and obsessions about things. And I thought, well, maybe there's something in this. Maybe this is what's wrong. But with my age as well, I was very aware of the fact that maybe I'm starting the perimenopause. You know, I was almost 42, and, you know, it was apparently not uncommon to have those kind of dizzy spells and off-balance feelings in that kind of time of life as well. So there was a lot of unknowns, and no one could really give me any real answers to what was going on. You know, I'd had all the tests to see physically that everything was okay. I had a lot of scans, but no one could really say, well, this is definitely anxiety, or this is, you know, definitely perimenopause, because those tests were kind of clear as well. They're inconclusive, but it's very hard to pinpoint that anyway. So, but I think once I became a parent of the fact it could be anxiety and everything else was ruled out, you know, I did start on some new antidepressants, and slowly but surely things started to get better. So I was very aware that maybe I was extreme in some very, you know, extreme forms of anxiety, you know, and that kind of stressful period. Maybe my nervous system was so overstimulated, and everything just felt out of whack, out of balance. So I became very conscious of maybe taking kind of time for myself and having relaxation kind of meditations. I tried everything, believe me. I tried everything to kind of get back to being me again, because I feel for anyone going through this right now, because please, I mean, obviously you need to check everything's okay, but it's worth noting that it can be postnatal anxiety. And I think we need more kind of talk about that, because there's so many people, so many women suffering, especially after having babies, and maybe getting the wrong diagnosis, or medical professionals not really understanding it, you know, because no one really ever said that it could be anxiety with me, that no one was ever conclusive about that. But it was discussed, but and I think once I got the crisis team involved, because I did have the crisis team after my last baby, and I was almost admitted to the mental health unit because it was so bad. I was very scared about taking the medications because of all the reactions, the weird stuff that had happened since I'd had my daughter. So they were very supportive of me and patient with me, as I slowly got back onto some medication. And that was an uphill battle because you do get some side effects with some medication, and it can be really challenging. It can be a really challenging time when you start medication and you don't know how you're going to react to it or if it's even going to work, But I did start a new medication, which I did see some improvements, and slowly but surely, as I became more active and doing things as the kind of pandemic eased off, things did get better, but it took a long time. I'd say that first year was extremely difficult after I'd had my daughter, just getting back to some kind of normal and taking the medication, and just slowly but surely these symptoms did disappear. So, which leads me to believe that everything that happened was a lot to do with anxiety and my nervous system being so overstimulated. So taking time for myself, and I was barely functioning at times, and having the help of my husband and his mum and dad, and my parents were supportive. My mum, like I say, was difficult because she was becoming quite unwell, but over the phone I could confide in them, and that helped. But I was barely functioning that first year, and it was really slow progression to get to a place where I was functioning around the house and with the children and just being me again. But you have to really give yourself that compassion and time. I know it's so difficult, and not everyone probably has the support I had in place, but you need to know that it can get better if everything else is ruled out, and there's something quite not right, and you're overly anxious about your health and your child's health, and it may be anxiety, it may be that, and maybe it's just something to do with the kind of balance of hormones after having a baby. But sometimes things just don't go back right, and for whatever reason, I don't know, but postnatal anxiety is really, really difficult. It's so hard to kind of get back to functioning normally, and the intrusive thoughts were also so prevalent during that time. I was just constant intrusions all the time, and I was involved in it as well. I was constantly online checking my symptoms, and that probably fed the whole thing. Looking back on it now, I was feeding into it with the obsessions and the compulsions to check. But once the medication kind of helped, and that's a personal thing to go on medication, but it really, I feel, helped me at that time because I was barely functioning at all. So I just wanted to spread more awareness about this, because there really isn't a lot of information out there about this, and it needs, why don't we talk about this? Why don't we talk about postnatal anxiety and OCD? Because it's a thing, it's a real thing. That perinatal period from conception to a year after birth, I know when I was talking to the crisis team, they even talked about extending it because it just wasn't long enough from conception, maybe the first 2 years of birth. Because like I say, my situation, it went on probably for a huge portion of those first 2 years of my daughter's life. I feel like I lost a lot of time with her because I wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't enjoying that time that should be a really happy time in our lives. It took away a lot from that. And, obviously my children were concerned about me. I wasn't doing the things I would normally do with them as well. And I just spent a lot of time at home. But I did get better, and I want to give everyone hope out there that's maybe going through this, and you can get better from this, So yeah, I just want to say, be kind to yourself. It's a really challenging time after having a baby anyway, but then to have this on top of all of that, it's scary. It's so frightening. It's traumatic. And I think it's just, now I'm coming through the other side of it, you can get better and things will get better. And just being open to the support that is out there, and just having someone to check in with, because I was often on the crisis hotline, to the mental health team. I had them. I'm still in contact with them to a point, but having them on hand, if something felt wrong, because I just kind of didn't want to be here anymore. It was just, I wasn't suicidal per se. Like I just didn't want the intrusive thoughts anymore. And I'd ring them up and be like, I can't do this anymore, because like with the physical symptoms and the anxiety and the intrusions, it just all felt too much. And I just wanted it to stop. I wanted to be here, and that's important to say. I didn't want to leave my family or anything like that. I did often say like I was a burden on them, because obviously I wasn't functioning, but they understood and they just wanted me to get better. But I wanted to be with them. I just wanted the thoughts to stop, the anxiety, the crippling sense of dread I had every day. It was like I was just riding a constant panic attack. Like every day, it was just like waking up and thinking, how am I going to get through the day with all these kind of panic attacks and the anxious feeling in the pit of my stomach and the intrusive thoughts. It's overwhelming. It's truly overwhelming. But with all the support I had, I came through it, and you can too if you're experiencing anything like this. Some people may have it to different degrees, but there is help, and you really need to reach out for support and help, because things will get better for you. So I hope this helped you today. Maybe if you've gone through something similar in the past, or maybe it's something you're going through now and you're just trying to find answers to what's going on. Maybe you're listening to this and thinking, wow, she's describing what I'm going through, as I did when I was reading other people's accounts of postnatal anxiety and OCD, so as long as other things are ruled out, there's a high probability it could be something like this. So just be gentle on yourself, and know that there's support out there. And please let me know in the comments if this has helped you today, or you've recognized some of these symptoms in yourself. And I will see you next time, guys. Thanks for watching so much.